Okay, so today we're tackling something pretty heavy, but really, really important. It's cancer recurrence. And it's something I know a lot of us think about. Whether we've faced cancer personally or maybe even supported someone we love who's gone through it.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really common concern. And it makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to unpack this whole thing using an article from Medline Plus, which is a service of the U.S. National Library of Medicine.
It's a great resource, really reliable information. And we're going to pull up the key points for you so you don't have to wade through all the details.
Exactly. And don't worry, we're not going to hit you with a ton of medical jargon.
Yeah.
We're going to break it down so it makes sense, and hopefully it'll actually leave you feeling more empowered rather than overwhelmed.
That's the goal.
Right. So let's just dive in. What exactly happens when cancer comes back? And why does it sometimes happen even after what seems like successful treatment?
Right. That's the big question.
Yeah.
And that's where it's so important to understand that there are actually different types of recurrence.
Okay.
So there's local recurrence, which just means that cancer comes back in the same spot where it first started.
Okay.
Then you've got regional recurrence. That's when it pops up in the tissues or lymph nodes that are nearby. And then the one that everyone's probably heard of is distant recurrence, which is also known as metastasis. That's when the cancer travels to a whole other part of the body.
Okay, that makes sense. But why does it come back at all? It's like you think you've tackled the problem, and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, it's back.
Right. Yeah. And you're right. It's a bit of a head scratcher. But here's the thing about cancer. Even the most effective treatments out there, they might not get every single cancer cell.
Really?
Yeah.
So there are some still lurking around even after treatment.
Yeah, you can think of it like dandelions in your yard.
Okay.
You might pull up most of them, but inevitably there are a few tiny seeds that are just hiding out of sight. And they're just waiting for the right conditions to sprout again.
Oh, so some cancer cells can basically go undercover and lie dormant for a while?
Exactly.
Wow.
And the thing is, those lurking cells, they often don't even show up on standard tests.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily that the treatment failed, it's just that cancer is just really complex,
Oh, wow.
And those hidden cells, they might eventually start growing again, which leads to what we call recurrence.
That dandelion analogy is actually really helpful, but also kind of unsettling.
Right.
But what I'm hearing is recurrence isn't necessarily inevitable.
You got it. It's not a foregone conclusion. There are tons of people who go through treatment and never, ever experience a recurrence.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, the key is to understand your own individual risk factors. And that's where things get really interesting, I think.
Okay, now you've got everyone's attention.
Right.
So what are those factors, and how do we figure out our own personal risk? What are the things to look out for?
Well, think of each person's risk profile as a unique puzzle.
Okay.
And each piece of the puzzle represents a different factor. So one piece might be the type of cancer you had. Another piece could be the stage it was at when you were diagnosed. And another piece might be the specific treatments you received.
Got it.
But even things like lifestyle choices can come into play, like what you eat and how much you exercise.
So it's not just one thing. It's the combination of all these factors that create your overall risk level.
Exactly. And that's why those open, honest conversations with your healthcare providers are so important. They can help you piece together your own unique puzzle, explain what signs to look for, and guide you towards some proactive steps you can take to manage your risk.
Okay. So we've established that recurrence is a possibility, but is not a guarantee.
Right.
And we've touched on these individual risk factors that sort of contribute to the whole picture. But now I think everyone's wondering, what can we actually do to manage this risk? Is it all out of our control, or are there things we can actually do?
That's where it gets empowering. Because while we can't, completely eliminate the possibility of recurrence, we can definitely take steps to stack the odds in our favor.
I like the sound of that. So what are some of those actionable steps? What can we actually do?
Well, first and foremost, those regular follow-up appointments are so important. They're not just routine checkups. They're opportunities for your healthcare team to really monitor your progress, catch any potential issues early on, and adjust your plan as needed.
So it's like having a dedicated team in your corner, constantly scanning the horizon for any signs of trouble.
Exactly. Early detection is everything. And speaking of being prepared, let's talk about the practical side of things, like maintaining your health insurance. That's crucial. It gives you a safety net and makes sure you can access the best possible care if you ever need it.
That's a really good point, especially if further treatment becomes necessary. You don't want to be dealing with financial stress on top of everything else.
Right, exactly.
But beyond the medical stuff, are there lifestyle changes we can make to lower our risk?
Absolutely. What you eat, how much you move, and even how you manage stress can all play a role. It's like building this fortress of good habits to protect your health. So let's start with diet. We all know that fruits, vegetables, and whole grains are the cornerstones of a healthy eating plan.
Right, right. But I think what people really want to know is, how does that specifically impact cancer recurrence risk?
Well, there's growing evidence that a diet rich in those good-for-you foods can actually help lower the risk of recurrence for certain types of cancer. It's about nourishing your body, giving it the nutrients it needs to stay strong and resilient.
Okay, so we're talking more than just general health benefits here. This is directly linked to reducing recurrence risk.
Yes, and that's not all. Another big one is tobacco. We all know smoking is harmful, but it's especially important to avoid it if you've had cancer.
Yeah.
Tobacco use, it's linked to so many different types of cancer. And quitting is honestly one of the most impactful things you can do for your health. Not just to help prevent recurrence, but just for your overall well-being too.
And what about alcohol? I know that's been linked to certain cancers as well.
That's right. It's generally recommended to limit your alcohol intake to moderate levels if you drink at all. The guidelines usually say no more than 1 drink a day for women and up to 2 for men.
So moderation is key.
Yeah.
As with so many things in life.
Right.
But what about those of us who, love to move our bodies? Does exercise play a role in all this? In reducing that recurrence risk?
You bet it does. Regular exercise is like a secret weapon in the fight against cancer recurrence.
Oh, wow. Really?
It helps improve your overall health, of course, but it also boosts your mood and helps you maintain a healthy weight, all of which contribute to a lower risk.
It's amazing how interconnected all these aspects of our health are.
It really is.
But I think it's also important to address the emotional side of things. Because, living with the fear of recurrence can be so stressful, like just constantly wondering if it's going to come back.
You're absolutely right. Managing that stress and anxiety is so important. And that's where all those stress-busting techniques come in. Things like talking to your loved ones, joining support groups, practicing relaxation techniques.
Like what? Like meditation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Meditation or deep breathing exercises, or even seeking professional counseling if you need a little extra support. Those are all valuable tools for coping with that emotional burden.
It's so important to remember that you're not alone in this. There's a whole network of support out there for people facing cancer. And that includes support for managing all those tricky emotions. But what happens if, despite our best efforts, cancer does return? What steps should someone take if they face that recurrence diagnosis? I know it's a tough reality to think about, but I think it's important we talk about it.
You're right. It is a tough topic, but you're also right we shouldn't shy away from it. So first and foremost, remember that a recurrence diagnosis doesn't mean the game is over. It simply means the journey's taking a new turn. And just like with any new path, it's important to gather information, understand the terrain, so you know what you're dealing with.
So that means talking to your healthcare team, asking all those difficult questions, and really getting a clear picture of what you're facing.
Exactly. Knowledge is power in this situation. Understanding your diagnosis, your treatment options, what you can expect, it can really help you feel more in control during a time that might feel very chaotic.
It's about regaining that sense of agency, even when you're faced with this setback.
Yes. And while seeking information is crucial, it's equally important to acknowledge the emotional impact of all of this. Because a recurrence diagnosis can be a real roller coaster of emotions.
I can imagine.
Shock, anger, fear.
Yeah.
You might even go through a period of denial.
It's like everything you thought you'd processed comes rushing back, maybe even stronger this time.
That's totally understandable. It's so important to allow yourself to feel those emotions. Acknowledge that it's okay to be scared, frustrated, or angry. Bottling up those feelings is not going to help anyone.
So what can people do to sort of navigate that emotional storm?
Well, this is where that support system we talked about earlier becomes even more important. Lean on your loved ones. Reach out to support groups. Connect with others who truly understand what you're going through. Professional counseling can also be incredibly helpful in processing those complex emotions and, learning some coping strategies that work for you.
It's a good reminder that you don't have to go through this alone. There are people who care, people who understand, and there are resources out there to help you navigate these challenges. But beyond the emotional side, are there any practical steps people can take to feel more empowered when facing a recurrence?
Setting goals, even small ones, can be really helpful. It gives you something to focus on, something to strive for, even amidst all the uncertainty.
So, like, what kinds of goals are we talking about?
It could be anything, really.
Hmm.
Like taking a daily walk, trying out a new recipe, maybe even learning a new skill. You know, those seemingly small actions, they can have a big impact on your mental and emotional well-being. They give you a sense of purpose and forward momentum.
So it's about reclaiming some control of your life, even in the face of this, unexpected detour.
Precisely. And remember, there's always hope. Cancer treatment is constantly evolving, with new discoveries and advancements happening all the time. These days, many types of cancer are managed as chronic illnesses, allowing people to live long and fulfilling lives even with a recurrence diagnosis.
That's so encouraging to hear. It's a good reminder that even though a recurrence can feel like a huge setback, it doesn't define the entire story. There's still so much possibility ahead.
Absolutely. And while we're on the topic of hope, let's talk about clinical trials. They offer access to cutting-edge treatments that may not be widely available yet. And participating in a clinical trial not only benefits your own health, it also contributes to the advancement of cancer research, potentially helping countless others down the line.
It's like turning a personal challenge to an opportunity to make a difference for others.
Exactly. And remember, even though recurrence can feel like a big step backwards, you've already demonstrated incredible strength and resilience in facing cancer once. You have the inner resources to navigate this new challenge.
That's such a powerful reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the fear and uncertainty, but hearing you talk about this with such a calm and knowledgeable perspective, it's incredibly reassuring.
I appreciate that. And it's important to remember that while cancer is a serious illness, fear doesn't have to control our lives.
So for anyone listening right now who might be feeling overwhelmed by the fear of recurrence, whether they've experienced it personally or through a loved one, what would you say to them?
I'd say, first of all, your feelings are completely valid. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel all the things. But try not to let fear paralyze you. Focus on what you can control. Seek information. Build a strong support system. And take those proactive steps to manage your health both physically and emotionally.
And remember that knowledge is your ally. The more you understand about cancer recurrence, the more empowered you'll feel to face it should it happen.
Absolutely. And there are some incredible resources out there to help you along the way. Organizations like the National Cancer Institute, the American Cancer Society, and of course Medline Plus, where we got so much of our information today. They offer reliable information support networks and tons of guidance to help you navigate this complex journey.
It's a good reminder that you're not alone in this fight. There's a whole community of people dedicated to supporting those affected by cancer. But I think we've covered a lot of ground today, and it's probably time to start wrapping things up. What are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember from this deep dive?
Oh, that's a great question. Let's recap the most important points. First, cancer recurrence is a possibility, but it's not a certainty. Understanding your individual risk factors is key. Second, there are proactive steps you can take to manage that risk and improve your overall health both physically and emotionally. And finally, even if cancer does return, there's hope. Advances in treatment are happening all the time, and many people live long and fulfilling lives even with a recurrence diagnosis. Knowledge support and a proactive approach can make all the difference.
So what does all of this mean for you? What's one step you can take today to feel more empowered on this journey? Whether it's scheduling a checkup, researching a healthy recipe, or reaching out to a loved one, there's always something you can do to move forward with strength and hope.
You're right. And remember, you are not alone. There's a whole community standing with you, ready to offer support and guidance.
It's easy to get kind of lost in the weeds when we talk about cancer recurrence.
Yeah, I get that.
But honestly, what I'm taking away from this deep dive is actually a sense of hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about living in fear. It's about understanding what we're dealing with and then making informed choices.
I love that. That's a great way to put it. It's not about ignoring the possibility of a recurrence, right?
Right.
It's about approaching it with a sense of agency.
Mm-hmm.
We can't control everything, but we can control how we prepare and how we respond.
And that all starts with understanding those individual risk factors.
Yeah.
Because it's not a one-size-fits-all situation, is it?
Exactly. It all comes back to that unique puzzle we talked about. With factors like the type of cancer, the stage at diagnosis, treatment history, and even lifestyle choices, they all kind of fit into that puzzle.
Right. And that's why having those open conversations with your healthcare providers is so important. They can help you sort through all those pieces.
Absolutely. It's like having a guide to help you navigate the terrain. And remember, that roadmap, it's not set in stone. It can evolve as you go, as new information comes out or as new treatments become available.
So it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Exactly. It's about staying informed and adapting as you need to.
So those regular follow-up appointments, that's where they come in. They really matter.
They do. They give your healthcare team a chance to monitor your progress, address any concerns, and tweak your plan as needed.
It's about staying, vigilant, I guess.
Yes.
And proactive.
Yes. Exactly. Instead of letting that fear take over. And remember, that proactive approach, it goes beyond just doctor's appointments, those healthy lifestyle choices we talked about, like the diet, the exercise, stress management, avoiding tobacco.
Yeah, those things really matter, don't they?
They do. They're not just good for you in general. They're active steps you can take to reduce your risk. It's like you're building a fortress around your health.
I like that.
Yeah.
Building a fortress.
Right.
Yeah. And let's not forget about the importance of connecting with people.
Oh, that's huge.
Having that strong support system, whether it's family, friends, support groups, professional counselors, it can make a world of difference.
Absolutely, because cancer and even just the fear of recurrence can be so isolating. But remember, there's a whole community out there, people who get it. You just have to reach out.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Oh, I'd say embrace hope. Because cancer research is constantly evolving. New discoveries are happening all the time. Treatments are getting better, more targeted, more effective. And the outlook for many types of cancer is actually improving. So while the journey might be tough, it's important to hold on to that hope and believe that a brighter future is possible.
Yeah, and never underestimate the power of, the human spirit, the resilience and strength and determination that people show in the face of cancer. It's truly inspiring.
It really is beautifully said. So amidst all the uncertainty, remember this. You are not defined by this diagnosis. You are a complex individual with so much potential for healing and growth, and you have an extraordinary life ahead of you.
That's a beautiful thought to end on, and that's where we'll leave it for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into cancer recurrence. We hope you found it helpful and empowering. And remember, you're not alone, and there is always hope.